So imagine you're a single mom of two who has just completed a 12 hours shift, and not just a 12 hours shift, 12 hours shift in a hospital where the alarm bells wouldn't stop ringing. Every patient seems to need your attention at the same time, and your decisions are, shall I say, tied to life and death. Now, after pressure, when you walk through your front door, the one thing you want is to be able to relax, recharge, and then return tomorrow to deliver. But you walk through that front door and you're met with your once lovely 16 years old boy who recently is beginning to display some attitudes that are a bit confusing. So you try to set boundaries and he just rolls his eyes, gives attitude. He's being a bit rude. And you stand there wondering, what has changed? What has happened to your boy? Are you doing something wrong? Are you being too free in the way you handle him? Are you being too strict? Are you missing something? And that's just the question you're wondering about. Well, let me just quickly say that what's happening to you is not as strange as you think it is, because a lot of parents do not adapt their method of parenting as their children grow. And so when you hear people refer to their teenagers as my baby boy, it's not just a way of expressing affection. Sometimes it's actually that's how they still see those their teenagers. They still see them as baby boys, and that's fine. But your method of parenting has to adapt to the changes that are happening. Why does this matter? Now, the teenage age is that age where your young person is beginning to ask a very dangerous question. Sometimes they ask that question even without knowing they're asking the question, or even without speaking or saying anything. And that question is, how far can I push these boundaries without getting into trouble? And that's why you see them doing things that you would just watch and wonder what's happening here. So you see them daring and taking risks among their mates just to have a laugh. The simple thing happening is that pushing of boundary is growth, is them growing, gaining more freedom, gaining more independence. But it becomes a bit challenging because that aspect or that part of their brain that brings in the judgment, that puts the safety bounds in place, is not fully developed yet. So you have a situation where they can easily veer into the path of danger. But on the other hand, you do not want to stop them from experiencing that growth. So what you have to do, and why this conversation is important, is you need to find a way of allowing them to push the boundaries of to grow in that space, but in a safe way. And the best way to do it is to set the boundaries at home under your supervision with your guidance than to allow the streets, the social media, and friends set the boundary. Because if that happens, the consequences can be dangerous. And so, this particular parent we're talking about, because they're already carrying the weight of bills, the weight of two children that they have to deal with, and the pressure of work on their shoulder, this extra emotional drain is going to hit a lot harder than it would ordinarily. And so, what they need is a strategy to be able to set clear boundaries without pushing their baby boy or their teenager further away. Ways to be able to enforce discipline without further creating some breakdown in the relationship that they have with their children. And so the question becomes, how exactly do you do that? At this point, it's not just about discipline anymore. It's about love. It's about fear of losing your boy to some wrong influence. And so you want to do everything you can to help them. Well, if you're in that situation, then this video is for you, because at the end of this video, my intention is to give you practical, easy to apply tips and tools that you can use to set clear boundaries without the shouting, without the confusion, and without even that sense of guilt that sometimes people feel when they try to enforce boundaries. But please, before we proceed to that, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, because every week I release practical, easy to apply tips that would make your parenting experience and your parenting journey a lot easier. So please, you don't want to miss it. Now, what do you do? Step number one, you need to communicate very clearly, reminding yourself always that this is home, not a court of law. Very important, because what happens sometimes is a lot of parents begin this conversation like a judge. You start saying things like, where are you coming from? What are you doing? What's wrong with you? And my all-time favorite, you will destroy your life, this boy. You will destroy your life. Now, when you approach the conversation from that point of view, what naturally happens is your teenager takes a defensive mode. They start acting like a defendant. It's no surprise that oftentimes you see defendants saying things like no comment. And so your young person assumes that position and they start telling lies. They start being defensive. They start being rude. That's not what you want. Let's look at a practical example then. So you have a situation where your teenager has come home late. Maybe you've sat down for a while waiting for them to come through, and they just come in. And if yours is like a lot of the teenagers I have dealt with, it will be unsurprising for them to just come in, give you some attitude, and just walk straight to their room or something like that. Now, the first thing you need to do is not to speak at that point where you are feeling angry. You're burning with anger at that point. That's not the best time to speak. So take a breather. Give yourself some time to relax before you have that conversation. When you're calm, the situation is calm, and it's time to have that conversation, a good place to start is call them by their name. James, Kunle, whatever their name is. I'm not here to argue with you or to have any fight. I'm here because I'm worried about you. I really care about you. And so, talk to me. What exactly is happening? Now, once you ask that question, the next step is for you to actually listen. Listen to understand, not to agree or disagree with them, just simply to understand. And by listening, I mean active listening, where you engage with your eye contact, your gestures. Now, there's this thing that a lot of people miss. Sometimes you communicate a lot even without saying a word. So say I'm talking to you now and I say something that you disagree with. It takes some discipline for you not to show an expression that tells me clearly that you disagree with me. I've had an instance where I was talking to someone and he said something that I disagreed with. And unconsciously I went, and he came back and said, I can tell from what you've just done that you do not agree with what I've said. So be careful not to communicate that thing where you're telling them clearly that you disagree with what they're saying, because the aim of this conversation is not to agree or disagree. It's just to understand. And now, the way I framed that question, what it does is it gives them the ability to take the lead. It lets them understand that you're giving them the opportunity to guide the direction and to decide where it goes. That makes a whole lot of difference. The second thing you need to do is to co-create the boundaries and always reinforce the why. Again, back to that idea of people not adapting their approach as their children grow. When that boy was a child, you would say, because I said so. And it would work. Sometimes it would work. When they've become teenagers, that would most likely, 9 times out of 10, that's not going to work. You can't just say, because I said so, or because you raise your voice a bit, or you show a certain attitude of frustration and they comply naturally. That might not work anymore. And so let's look at a scenario where the young person comes back again after curfew. The first question I would then ask is, did you co-create that boundary together? And how do you do that? So I would come to my young person and I'll be like, on school nights, we need to get home by 8 p.m. latest. And that's not because I'm being difficult or I'm just being harsh. That's simply because at nights, the chances of you getting into trouble increases. And I don't know what I would do or what would happen to me if anything happens to you. So what do you think we should do? What consequence do you think should come if you break that curfew? Now, what that does is it allows them to decide, and both of you would agree on what the consequence for coming home late would be. And so when you're enforcing a consequence that was co-created or co-agreed, the impact or the effect is less. The third thing that I would encourage you to do is to avoid power struggles and use positive reinforcement. What do I mean by power struggles? Let's say your young person is being rude when you're talking to them, right? rolling that eye and doing whatever they're doing. Instead of demanding or begging for respect at that point, what you do is de-escalate at that point. And what do I mean by de-escalation? So here's a young person being rude. They've just walked through the door. You try to have that conversation and they're being rude. You can say something in the lines of, I'm not going to speak to you when you're being rude to me, but this conversation, we're definitely going to have it because we are not going to have a situation in my house where you get yourself into trouble. And then you walk away. Later, you can reinitiate the conversation when things are a bit calmer. And that's you reinforcing the fact that you are the authority here. And in terms of positive reinforcement, so say they do something that they're supposed to do, don't just let it slide. Make sure you acknowledge it. So for instance, they come home on time. You could say something like, I've noticed you came home at the time you agreed. That's you building trust. Thank you. Well done. Something like that. What you're doing is you're encouraging them to keep that up, to keep doing that. And trust me, it always works. But everything I've said so far, it is possible that you have tried all of these things and you still not getting the result that you want. So what do you do? So let's say your teenager is withdrawing completely. They are being rude. They are lying constantly. You fear genuinely that they are getting involved with the wrong crowd. What do you do? Now, the truth of the matter is there are situations where you need to get external help. And by external help, I'm talking about things like mentoring, coaching, therapy, counseling, even school pastoral support. Please do not try to solve such situations on your own. If what you need is coaching and mentoring, please get in touch. That's what we do. I will be more than happy to help. Also, if you tell me your specific situation in the comment section, please avoid personal details or being rude, but just tell me, give me an idea of what you're dealing with. I might be able to also give you tailored advice on things that you can do to help your teenager. But again, subscribe, like, and follow me because every week I give you real tools, real tips that are applicable to real life situations that will make your parenting journey a lot more easier. So please hit the subscribe and follow button. One last request. Just leave a comment telling me what the most difficult boundary to enforce in your house is. Thank you.